away from the awful humidity of Delhi that we are facing, for which I have all of you to thank. But I really would like to begin by thanking Jeevan Dadaji, Major Chanajit Singh ji, Sujendra ji, and NIIS, IISC, and all my highly distinguished panelists. Thank you for being here. I have always been very fond of the Northeast. I've traveled there my entire adult life. I've worked in this area my entire adult life. But I'm neither a cookie, I'm not a Maggie, I'm not even from the Northeast. I stand here before you with the knowledge that I've collated in the last 15 years as an Indian. So any comments that I have today come from my personal experience, from my personal understanding of what the Northeast is, what Manipur is. I've had a long-standing relationship with the people there, with these states, but I stand here with my anxieties, with my concerns, not from an internal perspective, but from the perspective of this country. Now, we have heard about the Northeast more in the last 3 months, in my opinion, than we have heard in the last 20 years. That in itself says a lot. We are hearing about the Northeast because today Manipur is in conflict. Of all the advances that we've made in the Northeast, of all the advances that we've made in Manipur, nobody bothered covering it. Nobody bothered talking about it, nobody bothered analyzing it, nobody bothered giving it a thumbs up. Today we stand here because this mayhem has gone on for so long and it's impacted everybody. It's not just impacted the communities that live there, but it's impacted the entire country in terms of not just our internal security, but our national security. Today, I titled my talk, Politics of Identity and Conflict, because one of the things that I have seen emerging from this conflict is the identities, the binaries. And these binaries are binaries that are forged over a period of time. They never existed. One of the binaries that we see coming up is tribal versus non-tribal. Another binary that we see coming up is majority versus minority. We have these bifurcations without really understanding what they mean to us. Now, of course, some of you may have heard me say a lot of the stuff that I'm going to say today before, but I see a lot of new faces. And for me, it's important to reiterate the points that I'm going to say today over and over again. So when we come to tribal and non-tribal identities, which is what seemingly the conflict in Manipur is, we have to understand what does it mean. What is a tribal, what is a non-tribal? Because these ideas, these labels, didn't really ever exist in our mainstream consciousness. These are new identities that were forged because of the colonial impact that we had on the Northeast and from the lens that they saw us from. So the whole tribal identity was studied in terms of how anthropologists saw it. Anthropology in itself as a subject, and I'm an anthropologist so I can say this with quite a bit of certainty, that anthropology itself is a colonial arm. It was created to study other societies. And it was created to study other societies from the reference point of who created it. Therefore, it was always studied in terms of the other. And when these British powers got interested in the Northeast, that's what they encountered. They encountered these populations that they'd never seen. They encountered these communities to whom they compared themselves to. And that was compared in the sense of civilized and non-civilized. It was compared in the sense of savages and non-savages, barbarians, non-barbarians, pagans, non-pagans. But the reference point was then. The reference point was not an internal lens. It was not an internal understanding of these societies. It was an external lens. So who are you comparing them to? You're comparing them to the modern Western white man who has come into a region that is alien to him and is saying, well, they don't have the same standards as we do. And therefore, this creation of this idea of a tribe Before that, we didn't have this sort of nomenclature. Even the legalization of it, the constitutional privileges that we see today have all come only as late as 1930s. It was included in the census much later. The word tribe never existed. It was included because they needed to somehow set apart these populations from the caste studies that were doing. The idea of animism, we don't have a word like animism. We don't even have an equivalent to animism. But this was created again so that this could be, this could be the population bifurcation in the censuses, and it again came as late as the 1930s, but it's only taken us over 100 years to cement these bifurcations. And that says a lot about how much we have advanced, because we changed none of this post-independence. Neither did we change the subjects that we were studying, neither did we change the frameworks in these subjects, neither did we bother looking at all the great sociologists and anthropologists who came from the internal view of sociology or anthropology. We disregarded all of them. So till date, what we study, till date, a lot of the formulations that we have of these frameworks are from the Western point of view, not from the Indian point of view. But having said that, the fact remains that now these are cemented in not just our nomenclature, it's cemented not just legally, but it's also cemented within our societies, and therefore this tribal versus non-tribal binary. If we were to really ask ourselves, and just for a minute indulge me, if we were to ask ourselves, who is a tribal? What are the ideas that would come up? I'd love to put this question up to the audience. Who do you say is a tribal? Any answers?
Someone not using any technology.
Correct. Now there are characteristics attached to it. Like you said, somebody not using technology. One of the characteristics attached to a tribal is somebody who has a geographical isolation, somebody who has a shyness of contact, somebody who has indigenous faith, so on and so forth, and somebody who isn't a part of mainstream modern society. Which tribal community fits into that today? I don't think many, apart from maybe some who are, like we discussed yesterday, maybe some who are in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, maybe some who are very remote. So therefore, where does this competitiveness come in for the privileges that are provided to a tribal versus privileges that are not provided to a tribal? And many of us have looked at this conflict from the genesis of this point in terms of the recommendation that was given by the High Court being the trigger of this conflict. But we have to look at it in a deeper way. What are we objecting to? What are we, why are we saying that a certain community cannot be included in a scheduled tribe list? On basis what? Because most of the communities don't fit into those characteristics. There are constitutional reservations that say that every 10 years there is a committee that is supposed to appraise the president on which communities can fit into this and which communities need further development. That also doesn't happen. So we've made these identities, we've forged these divisions, and now we fight over it, which to me is highly illogical. But having said that, let me also say that, unfortunately the tribal community has, the identity that it has legal sanctions, and we have to comply to those legal sanctions. But I think we also have to be open-minded to see whether those legal sanctions really, in all rationality, are useful and are applicable to the cost of the peace of the state. And not just the state has a huge geopolitical importance to all of the country. Does it have that sort of legitimacy across the region and also in other parts of India? But of course, as we all know, any privileges given once cannot ever be taken back, and that is a problem that we deal with. Now, we also have seen another binary coming up, and that binary is of a majority-minority binary. We see this consistently happening in any dialogue that happens in India. And more often than not, this binary is put from someone else, someone from the outside. Now, in this case, in the Manipur case, what is a majority, what is a minority? Is 53% a majority? I doubt that 53% is a majority. a majority minority binary, if you were to ask me, would be possibly a comparison between the Hindus and the Parsis in India, maybe, which, stand at 1 or 2%. I consider them minorities. I don't think this is a majority-minority debate to begin with, but it's been made so because the more complex you make a conflict, the more difficult it becomes to unravel it, and therefore it can keep going on and on and on till it reaches a point of no return. Another thing that I see in this majority-minority binary is, of course, certain facts that come up. Certain anxieties that come up by communities who think that they are minority and communities who think that they're losing their dominant status, so as to say. So, for example, in this case, and sir, please feel free to correct me, we've seen that there are certain privileges that, I would say this and without any offense, that the so-called minority enjoys, under the privileges that are given to them because they are scheduled tribes. Now, that kind of privilege, like income tax exemption or reservations in education and administration, or having the kind of autonomy that they enjoy in terms of the hill councils, are privileges that literally somebody like me coming from Delhi is quite surprising, because I'd love to have privileges like that. I'd love to have income tax exemption, But unfortunately, these are the privileges that we give them. But when we look at the Meitei community, which is considered the majority, do they have these privileges? They don't. Do they have the same sort of limitations to their progress? Yes, they do. Has Manipur always been in our mainstream consciousness? No. Has that affected people who have lived in Manipur? Of course it has. A decade ago when I used to travel to Manipur, it was a different world. There was hardly any infrastructure. There used to be difficulties in traveling from one place to another, especially in the hill areas, because you were fearful of your safety. You wouldn't see a certain age group of people because, post-school, they would choose to go to Bangalore or Delhi for better opportunities. Did that sort of prolonged emotional impact and the kind of deficit of attention that this region had not affect the entire population altogether, or did it only affect one part of the population? Of course it affected everybody. And everybody reeled under that kind of pressure of conflict and underdevelopment. In the last 5-6 years when I was traveling there, I started noticing a difference because of the relative peace that had come. I started seeing kids come back, it was very impressive. They set up restaurants. There were restaurants finally that I could go to, decent hotels that I could stay in, travel at any time that I wanted to. With this conflict, that's what I feel bad about. That's what really hurts me, because now, again, from looking at this region from a point of view of conflict, moving to looking at it from being really the most crucial part of our Act-East policy, being one of the most crucial states to our geopolitical fortunes, to now again back to conflict. And that sort of imagery is not going to go away anytime soon, at least not in the near future. But, on the other side, it's also true that, in this whole majority-minority sort of binary, it's also true that, there are areas, the tribal areas are underdeveloped, and we do need to have or keep that in mind, because eventually there's only a fraction of the budget that goes there, and certain anxieties are justifiable, and you cannot completely disregard that as well. However, on the other side, I would also say that the hill councils are vested with a lot of power. Whether those powers are being used to the full of their capacity is something that we must discuss and figure out how they can be implemented better. They have the power to assess or to deliberate on healthcare, on family welfare, on many of these really important aspects. But are they doing a comprehensive job? Are they being able to provide their communities with what they are, with the powers that they've invested in? Maybe not. And that is what we need to discuss. The third binary that I see coming up, and I think this is a very important binary because this also involves the international community, is the completely false binary of Hindus versus Christians. And I think we don't want to talk about it because it's so sensitive, but I also think it's important to talk about it because whether we are or not, the international world is. And that is the lens that they are putting on us. Now, there's absolutely no justification and it upsets me because I, as somebody who spent my entire life in the Northeast, my entire career in the Northeast, always begin and end my talks by saying that I still have so much to learn. These are complex areas, and I don't say this in terms of the people are complex or whatever. These are complex areas because of their historical background, because of their geographical location, because of their geopolitical strategic importance, and because of the kind of community compositions that they have. It's not that easy to understand. Languages are different, cultures are different. You can keep going there, but every time I go there, I learn 2 more new things and come. Today I stand here before you. I will probably think that I have less to offer and more to learn, and I will learn 2 more things and go. Except that's not how everybody looks at it. The international community has taken out a resolution. The members of European Parliament have had the audacity to take out a resolution deeming this conflict a religious conflict and asking for the release of a Pakistani journalist. What does that have to do with Manipur? So this sort of politicization, this sort of, some basic understanding or hardly any understanding of complex situations, and then having the audacity to deliberate on it and give public statements without the fear of any repercussion is to me absolutely unacceptable, and is to me something that complicates matters in our own country. And I think that is something that we have to look at very strongly, look at very deeply, because as we know that this is not about religion. If it was about religion, there wouldn't be many Christian churches that are burned, there wouldn't be temples that are burned, there wouldn't be cookie Christian churches that are burned. This is way beyond, everything cannot in India, just for the sake of political, political mileage, be looked at from the lens of religion. And these are things I think that not just India, but definitely the people of Manipur should be objecting to, and objecting to vociferously and publicly. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. Yes, I do see the kind of deliberations and the dialogues that we've had for the first time in the last 2 decades. Northeast was never in the mental consciousness of mainstream media. Today it is. Today we have the opportunity to stand before, in one of the most foremost universities, colleges, institutions in this country, amongst academics and distinguished guests like yourself, and think about these things. And I think that's a start. We must not lose hope. But I also think that we must look at these subjects very deeply. Now, I don't have much time, I believe.
You have 3 minutes.
I only have 3 minutes. That's not much time at all. But let me wrap it up in that. I think we have to understand that the Manipur conflict is not limited to Manipur. It has huge impacts on the rest of us. Manipur is geostrategically hugely important for us. Our entire Act East policy is based on what we understand as the gateway to Southeast Asia, which is Moreh, the city on the border of Manipur. How is it helpful to us? It's helpful to us because Manipur can give us the springboard that we need to reach out towards the ASEAN countries. China already has that springboard through its Yunnan province. We don't. It also gives us the ability to look at Southeast Asia, not just for our trade routes, not just for our commerce routes, but also for our soft power that we have exported into Southeast Asia and the soft power that we can get from it, encouraging not just trade, not just commerce, but encouraging the kind of interaction that we haven't seen in between Southeast Asia and the rest of the country in a millennia. I'll give you an example. One of our biggest exports is Buddhism. Buddhism, right now the pilgrimage comes via Calcutta. If we had sustained peace in Manipur, and if we could use the route of Moreh to come in, it would cost Buddhist pilgrimage half the time and half the money.